Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word in danger of losing its meaning altogether. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Craig Detweiler. Dr. Detweiler is the president and CEO of Wedgwood Circle, a philanthropic investment collective funding creative projects of meaning. He's also the dean of the College of Arts and Media at Grand Canyon University. His cultural commentary has appeared on Nightline, CNN, NPR, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. In 2016, he was named Variety's Mentor of the Year. Craig, I am so excited for this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, Jared. Honored to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's dive right in. What, in your mind, is innovation?
Innovation is all about changing the game. Innovation shifts the paradigm in ideas, in culture, in products. It introduces something that we haven't seen before.
Changing the game. I love that. Changing the game, shifting the paradigm, things we haven't seen. All of that is very pointed, but also very reapplicable and universal. To your mind, what does shifting a paradigm look like?
Well, if I think about it musically, like we might say that Beyonce's new album, as she moved into country, right? Mm-hmm. She's doing something we haven't seen before, or she's doing history, music history, in a way we haven't seen before.
Yes.
But she's not quite inventing a new genre.
Right.
She's reinterpreting an existing genre. If you want to talk about somebody shifting a paradigm, that might be somebody like Kool Herc, who's inventing hip hop before people even know what to call it.
Wow. Right.
So it's like you're inventing a whole new genre, a whole new way of communicating via beats and rhymes. There were maybe elements of it before, but nobody had quite fused it in that way.
I see.
I think about Antonio Gaudi, the architect in Barcelona. He didn't have technical training per se. When he was designing his buildings, his Sagrada Familia Cathedral, he literally flipped it and built it upside down. Mm-hmm. His model was, I'm going to build it upside down and I'm going to look at how the weights and everything shifts. And so he didn't have the ability to build it upright, right? He didn't have the money. He didn't have the time. So he's like, I'm going to build it upside down. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to shift the weights and the strings. I'm going to mess with it. And then I think when it's done, it can be built on Earth going forward. Right. But even then, right, it still took another 100 years of innovation and architectural catch-up where technology wasn't able to catch up with his full vision.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. I think creativity and technique go hand in hand everywhere. Mm-hmm. And architecture is one of those domains that the level of technical proficiency and the level of artistry, they have to move hand in hand. And thinking about how you can envision something before you have the technical mastery to be able to bring it to life, to me, that's amazing.
Well, and he did it by studying nature. He literally looked at the stalks of trees and how their root system supported this massive structure of leaves above them. He's like, how do they hold up all that weight? Well, then he's looking at how they distribute.
Right.
And so the cathedral in Barcelona, Sagrada Familia, the most spectacular building on earth, I actually believe, you'll see that the columns actually get wider at the base, just like in certain kinds of trees, right?
Right.
That are trying to support a lot of weight.
Right.
He was trying to figure out how to do drainage on roofs, and he was looking at leaves on systems.
Right.
And how the water runs off.
Right. The subtlety of the shape and how it encourages the rainwater to fall off down to the roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it was just careful observation and perception. It was like the idea already existed in nature, right? It had been created, it had been given to us by a creator. But then we, in studying it, he's coming up with new architectural ideas and say, well, this exists over here. What would that look like in concrete? What would that look like in steel? How do we build something that we know works on this scale over here?
Mm-hmm. It's so great. And it's so reapplicable. But I ask you, is there a way to sort of teach someone to look for those things in other places? Because like you said, it's the ability to observe, but also to understand what you're seeing and to go looking for the right things.
So in my new book, Honest Creativity, I really challenge people to slow down long enough to both perceive as well as receive what may be right in front of us. But there's so many distractions, so many things pulling for our attention that we kind of race through life and we might miss the opportunity or the feeling that's right in front of us. We talked a little bit about hip hop. Somebody attending Kool Herc's block party and hearing hip hop, some people were like, hey, this is great dance music. Other people were like, how'd you do that? Show me what's going on with that record.
Right.
What's that scratch thing that you did?
Right.
What's a break beat? You were taking the record and shifting it back and forth.
Right.
So everybody was there.
Right.
But only a few people were saying, what do I do with this? And how do I apply this? And how do I take this further? And then you get Grandmaster Flash. And then as Grandmaster Flash is heard by, Run DMC or Jam Master Jay, then they're like, oh, I'm going to do my version on it.
Yes.
So it's seeing the opportunity, perceiving how it's done, and then figuring how to receive it into yourself in a way that says, okay, what am I going to bring to it? And how do I move it forward?
Exactly.
What's my original take on somebody else's innovation?
Right. I'm not hearing you say is less important or less valid. It's just not innovation. It has its place. It's just not that thing.
Yeah. Well, as an example, it's often the second or third person who actually gets paid. Right?
That's right. Like
Kool Herc, he didn't get a record contract.
Right.
Somebody else was Sugar Hill Gang and
right.
Sylvia Robinson at Sugar Hill Records. She was the one who was like, I can make money off this.
Right. Exactly.
So her innovation was like, I see the dollar signs.
Right.
That's a different kind of genius. One of the odd examples I talk about in the book is I asked the question, who invented the margarita? Like, I love a good margarita. We all do. Who invented it? Do we know? A bunch of people have claimed. Some hotel bar in Mexico said, oh, we invented it. Somebody else in Texas was like, no. We did that in my house and it was my mother's recipe. And all we know for sure is the only person who really got the richest off of the margarita was Jimmy Buffett, who had one song called Margaritaville, and he turned it into a financial empire.
Wow.
Turned it into hotels, casinos,
restaurants, yeah.
T-shirts, restaurants. There's even a retirement community.
Yeah.
There's a Margaritaville retirement community in Florida.
I did not know that.
So the man made over like $1 billion of business off of a drink that somebody else made, right? He just wrote a cute 3-minute song about it.
Right.
But the business brain, that was what he brought to it, right?
Right.
So he didn't invent the margarita, but he understood what to do with the concept of the margarita and all that it represented.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, exactly. It's a different form. It's not culinary innovation. It's business model innovation.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Your examples bring up so many parallels in my mind around folks like Ahmet Ertegun, Clive Davis, and folks like that who hear differently and understand what people are looking for, but you would never want them to step in front of a microphone or pick up an instrument.
That's it.
And they would never want to do that. The different forms of genius and innovation and the ways of perceiving and receiving value, I think, are core to what I'm hearing you describe.
Well, and I talk a lot in the book about the need for, I would call it, to receive honest criticism. And so I feel like with producers and record label owners like Ahmet Ertegun and Clive Davis, they had golden ears.
Yeah.
They could hear the possibility in somebody's voice, whether that's pioneering R&B at Atlantic Records or picking Whitney Houston out and saying, I see what's possible here.
Yeah.
But then Whitney Houston, she needed somebody to produce those records, to give her that musical bed that she can then triumph within.
Exactly.
And that, as an artist, for you to be humble enough to say, I don't have everything I need. I need a producer. I need someone who can hear me better. I need someone who knows how to market me, how to sell me into the marketplace. I need someone who knows how to book concerts. I need someone who can design T-shirts, right?
Right.
So very rare would be the person who is both artist, entrepreneur, and delivery person who's going to like figure out how to do the trucks, how to get the equipment
Right.
from one place to another. That's a different gift. So that a certain humility that opens us up to criticism, or I would say in this case, honest collaboration.
Exactly.
Well, that's when you get kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of result.
Mm.
So it's like Whitney Houston plus Clive Davis plus Michael Narada Walden or somebody who's making the music for her. Now you've got something else.
I see. Right. Taking those analogies and those lessons, I look at the world through the lens of a musician. I've been playing instruments and singing since I was small. And I did that before I was an engineer, before I was a consultant, all that stuff. So it's still the kind of the way I view the world. It puzzles me that there aren't more musical analogies in business vernacular.
Mm.
There's a lot of sports talk. There's a lot of war talk. There's a lot of winning and losing, living and dying. But there's not a whole lot of musical analogies. In listening to how you were describing that relationship between Clive and Whitney and what it took to bring that to life, looking at folks like Taylor Swift and Beyonce who are creating business empires around their musical gifts, it just surprises me that more of those examples and analogies haven't made their way into the business world.
Yeah. Honest Creativity, I actually put together a Spotify playlist that goes with the book.
That's so great.
And I knew everybody wasn't on Spotify, so I think I put it on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
If you look up Honest Creativity on YouTube, you'll find clips from all the songs and the references. And maybe it just has to do with how we perceive the world. Some people are visually oriented. Some people, it's through what they hear. But as a screenwriter, for me, it might be something I overhear.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm in a coffee shop and I hear somebody say a phrase and I'm like, oh, what is that?
Ah, interesting.
A movie I wrote once came out of just being in a restaurant in Paris around Christmas time. And I noticed everybody had their dogs with them. And they were in these fancy restaurants and they were buying like fancy food for the dog. And I was like, wow, they treat their dogs like royalty.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, there's a movie idea. Royalty goes to the dogs. I just flipped it.
Wow.
So I wrote this thing about a British duke who passes away, doesn't have any kids, and he gives his estate to his dog. So now the dog becomes the duke. And so it's a silly idea, right? But it just was perceived by like, why does everybody treat their dogs like they're kings and queens?
Right.
And then it was a very small leap to, oh, what if? So again, that's that perceiving and receiving. So, seeing something, hearing something, I think can be enough to launch huge businesses, huge possibilities.
Yeah.
But yeah, why people don't use musical analogies? I don't know, because I love to talk music.
Because you do. I think that little thing you just did there, going from why to what if, to me, that's a great model as a takeaway from thought exercises. That perceiving to receiving shift. Why is this the way it is? What if it were different? Or what if it were bigger? Or what if it were smaller? Or what if it were in another place? That's a really great nugget. I'm going to use that after this call.
Please. That is at the root of all creative efforts and all entrepreneurial ventures, is trying to say, this thing bothers me, this thing disturbs me, or this thing inspires me. Why doesn't it exist? Or why isn't that being said? It's introducing that thing into the world that you wish existed. That service that you would like to see provided.
Yes.
That thing that's already frustrating you when you're trying to get from point A to B.
Right.
So it's stepping into the gap, in a sense, yourself. Instead of saying, I wish somebody would. It's saying, why wouldn't I potentially be the person to at least introduce that or say that?
Right. And I can imagine you have never been a duke and passed your crown to a dog. So I think, I'm just going out on that limb.
Yes.
So I think there's also an element of imagination or some sort of element of expansion that could also potentially be empathy driven.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with your own experience as a human being, as a person, your own curiosity, your own view of it, it feels like there's probably a role for empathy or expanding the view of, okay, as a human, this human experience could exist in other places, in other ways, but still being able to tap into the authenticity of your own experience.
That's right. Well, so honest creativity, I begin the book with my sort of confession of my own honest fears, which is a form of empathy.
Yes.
Of saying, I too have been afraid. I too have been injured. I too have been hurt.
Right.
But also our honest aspirations. I too aspire. I too hope. I also dream. And it's sort of that combination of our wildest imagination, our biggest dreams, and our biggest fears of risk and failure and defeat that often keep us from pursuing those dreams.
Right.
Until we name those things, get in touch with those things. I think that's why oftentimes we self-sabotage, and it keeps us from getting started. We immediately kind of talk about all the scenarios in our head. This could go wrong. This could go wrong based on this. And somebody told me this. And I remember my mom saying, you'll never be anything.
Yeah.
And sort of all those tapes that we've rehearsed. But to then look at that and say, well, actually, that could be my superpower. Because if I have all those fears and all those disappointments, isn't that empathy that I realize, oh, my neighbor has that as well. Or my neighbor has that hope or that desire. And can I be part of helping fulfill that for them? That's the entrepreneurial effort.
Right.
I have a dream and I'd like to share it with you because I think you might also share that dream.
That's so well said. In there, I think, is also an opportunity for the world to think differently about bridging gaps. Instead of focusing on what makes us different, what separates us, thinking more about, well, what I suffer for this reason, this other person suffers for that reason, but we both suffer. And how can we connect in a way that is authentic to each person's own challenges, but also connect on a human level that celebrates what we have in common? It feels like that is something that I took away from what you were saying in terms of how to think about another person without having to fully understand exactly how their lived experience works.
Right. I read the book Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison.
Ralph Ellison, loved that book. Yes.
Which, what does it mean to feel invisible? Okay. That's a deep question, right? Where I read it was really important. I was actually living in Japan and teaching English at the time outside Tokyo. And I, for the first time, was feeling what it was like to be a minority. I felt like, oh, I'm in this majority culture that I don't understand. There's a lot of rules I don't understand.
So many.
There's a language I don't understand. And now I feel invisible. I feel kind of unknown and I'm sort of stumbling and not sure how to proceed.
Right.
And so my own experience in Japan connected with Ralph Ellison's experience.
Yes.
That he's writing about in 1952. And then I was like, this may be the greatest book of all time because of how profoundly he gets inside our own sense of feeling invisible and powerless. And what can I do? And does anybody know I exist? And does my life matter? And all of those things that all of us ask on all of those times. And that's the beauty of art. That's the beauty of creativity. That's the beauty even of business and innovation is I see you. I see you as a customer. I see you as someone with a need. I see you as someone who has something to contribute. I see you as someone valuable. And so I'm trying to draw that out and get people to, in a sense, own their own power. In an age of AI where it's very easy to feel disempowered, I'm trying to say, no. Tap into your HI, your human imagination, your human intelligence, your human ingenuity.
I love that. HI, that's powerful stuff. I think the aspect of feeling invisible and naming it in your words and on your terms, I think that act of courage and optimism, I think that you have to have a bit of optimism to say, I'm going to put this out there and I'm going to name it. And I believe good things will come from that. There are certain things that make an entrepreneur or an innovator, or however you want to phrase it, a little different from the average person. And I think sometimes that element of public suffering with the optimistic view that good things will come of it is a thing you see in musicians and I see in the business world that I really admire.
Well, people's reasons for starting and then what they do with it aren't always the same.
That's so true.
So
True.
With Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg didn't invent social media. There was already
MySpace.
There was already Friendster.
Mm-hmm.
So he had seen this idea of like gathering community. He maybe started it like a lonely guy looking for a date.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted a place to put all the potential first-year students at Harvard all in the same place.
Right.
And so you could start it out of loneliness, out of longing for connection, searching for love. Those are all very deeply human things. And I think the growth of Facebook showed our deep longing for connection as a community.
Mm-hmm.
But then along the way, a few $1 billion later, he may have forgotten.
Right.
Now he's existing to prop up the platform.
Yes.
Rather than realizing like, well, is this connecting people or is this disconnecting people? Is this drawing people closer together or am I actually promoting division? And so that idea or that impetus that starts you on that entrepreneurial road, you have to keep checking yourself so that you don't have that mission drift where now you're existing to keep your enterprise in motion rather than like, what is the purpose of the enterprise?
Purpose. What is the role of purpose in innovation or in entrepreneurship or creativity?
Yeah, I think it's what sustains you through the defeats, the setbacks.
Yes.
It's the thing that makes you press on.
Yes.
Okay, that didn't work, but it doesn't mean this is a bad idea. It doesn't mean that there isn't still an angle here. How do I press on? Another entrepreneur that we admire and dread at the same time is somebody like Elon Musk, who didn't invent the electric car.
No, not at all.
I think historically, people are going to be like, oh, yes, he invented the Tesla.
Right.
He didn't even invent the Tesla. Two other guys in the Bay Area who were engineers figured out how to build that thing.
Wow.
But they thought it was only for a few high-end owners who were interested in it. And he said, no, this actually could be for the masses. This could solve a lot of our environmental problems. This should be accessible and done at scale. And they were like, you're crazy. That's not going to happen. And so he basically bought them out. He was like, you know what? I'll just take the technology and I'll show you that you're wrong.
Right.
Which in a sense, he proved to be right.
Right. Yeah.
They had the vision to build it. They didn't quite know what to do with it. It's interesting. Their purpose might have been, I'll almost say like pure experimentation. I want to prove that I can build this car that can be fast and efficient. But they didn't understand scale. His purpose was, if we don't change some of the situation on our consumption here, we're all going to have to go to Mars.
Right.
Because we're going to burn up this planet. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he had, maybe there was profit motive there, but there was also an altruistic moment that was looking at the purpose. His purpose initially was to try to save us from self-destruction,
right,
from too much consumption of fossil fuels. To the degree that Tesla is staying on that path, okay, now I see the mission of the organization.
Right.
When you're taking that money to go and buy Twitter because you hate it and now you want to sort of destroy it as a sandbox experience, I don't know. But the platform formerly known as Twitter, all of us are like, I don't know what that was.
Right.
I don't know what that was about.
Yeah. So it reinforces your point about purpose being the thing that keeps you moving and keeps you motivated and keeps you pushing through the hard times. It feels like other elements of his portfolio have taken a step back since he sort of got fixated on this thing that is different from the purpose that got the ball rolling. And I love connecting those two different kinds of purposes. The technology-driven entrepreneur that says, oh, I want to do this thing because I want to prove that it can be done.
Yeah.
And that allows them to push through technical hurdles and all the types of things that you have to invent and conceive of to do that. But then you go, okay, well, let's sell this to 1,000 people instead of 10 people. Like, no, that's too much work, So it's funny. It's funny because it just really does reinforce, like, well, depending on where your passion and your purpose is, something either feels energizing or feels like work.
Yeah. And there's innovation, there's technical innovation, and then there's sales innovation. Those are two different things. Almost like different parts of the brain.
Yes. And that's part of my challenge with, and part of why we started this podcast, is when people say innovation, we need more innovation, we need to be innovative, or this is an innovative thing. I think sometimes it creates a separation and the illusion that communication has occurred. George Bernard Shaw quote. And so I may be talking about technical innovation and you may be talking about sales innovation. And we could go off within the same company doing our thing and come back together 6, 9, 12 months later and not be remotely in the same place or have been working on the same things. And there's a cost to that. There's a tax associated with that lack of clarity around the word that I think people don't always fully appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's right. What I've found also is that you may not get the affirmation. Ask Vincent van Gogh, right?
Right.
Doing not a lot of sales, right? But he kind of won the long game.
Yep.
There's a woman whose paintings have just been discovered named Hilma af Klint. She's from Sweden. And only recently are people saying, I think she might have invented modernism, not Picasso.
Wow.
Not some of these other jokers.
So she's like late 1800s, early 1900s?
Yeah, late 1800s, and doing very modernist things without getting proper credit. Until now.
Wow.
Her paintings literally were hidden or buried for like 50 to 60 years until they were rediscovered.
Unbelievable. I have so much Googling to do after this conversation.
It's all in the book. It's all in the book.
Yes,
Get the book.
Yes, it is.
It's all in there. Honest creativity. Buy it now. Here's the sales taking over.
Love it. Yes, the sales innovation. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I could talk to you forever on various topics. But before I let you go, I want to make sure we ask if you have any advice for innovators.
I would say trust your instincts. All too often, I think our self-doubt talks us out of taking risks and going with that thing that's been planted in our heart or our mind. And so how do we press on? I would say find some people to partner with. You might need some capital. You might need some investors, which is part of it. But all too often, we'll start by saying, well, I don't know anybody, or I don't know where to get the money, or that'll never happen. And it's like, well, 100% of not trying will never happen.
Right, exactly.
And you don't know about the accidents that you'll find along the way. There's an entrepreneur inventor named Lonnie Johnson, who was a NASA scientist. He was working on projects for JPL, and he was experimenting with like Freon and water pressure. And he accidentally was like, wow, that was a big blast of water. And he was like, that's like a super water gun that I've never seen before. Well, he perfected that water gun, gave it to his daughter, let her play with it. All the neighbor kids are like, what's that thing? That became the super soaker.
Oh, super soaker.
That became the super soaker,
such a big part of my childhood. Yes.
And it was an accident that was discovered en route to trying to solve a problem in aerospace. But he made so much money off the toy that he left NASA and went into business as his own enterprise. So there's like accidents that you find even on that journey of innovation.
Right.
So pushing out, not even being sure whether it's going to work or what you're going to find, is part of that process.
Trust your instincts and stick with it and find people to come along with you. That is fantastic advice. Craig Detweiler, author, Honest Creativity. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, and enjoy the conversation, and hope we can stay in touch.
It's been great to be here, and keep up the great work, Jared, on the What is Innovation podcast. Peace.
All right. Take care. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to get more insights from innovators across the world. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for additional content and conversation. I hope to see you there. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.